There is an experiment in quantum physics that should not be possible. Fire a single particle at a wall with 2 slits cut into it. Don't watch it. It passes through both slits at once, it behaves like a wave, spreading, existing everywhere and nowhere until it lands. But watch it. Just watch it. And the particle stops being a wave. It chooses. It becomes a single point, a single decision, a single fact. The act of observing collapses infinite possibility into one outcome. Physicists have spent 100 years arguing about why this happens. But almost no one asks the more uncomfortable question. If watching changes what is real, what happens when the thing being watched is you? Somewhere inside your mind, there is an observer. It has been running since before you could speak. It has watched every choice you've made, every wound you've buried, every version of yourself you've refused to look at directly. Carl Jung had a name for the part of you that observer refuses to see. He called it the shadow. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the moment you truly watch your shadow, really watch it, the way a physicist watches a particle, it stops behaving the way it always has. It changes. Because you changed it. Just by looking. Stay until the end, because the third part of this video contains the one exercise that will let you test this on yourself, tonight, in less than 10 minutes. Let's begin. To understand your shadow, we first need to understand the observer. Not the philosophical idea of it, the literal, measurable, laboratory-proven fact of it. The double-slit experiment I just described is not a metaphor. It is one of the most repeated, most verified experiments in the history of science. Electrons, photons, even large molecules, when unobserved, they behave as probability. As potential. As a kind of fog of could be. The moment a measuring device, a detector, an instrument, a form of observation, is introduced, that fog collapses into a single, definite state. Physicists call this the observer effect, and there are 2 ways people misunderstand it, so let's clear both up before we go further. The first misunderstanding is that observation means a conscious mind has to be watching, like some cosmic security camera pointed at the universe waiting for a human being to glance at it. That's not quite it. In physics, observation more precisely means interaction, any interaction with the system that extracts information about it. A photon bouncing off a detector counts. A conscious mind is not required for the physics to work. The second misunderstanding is the opposite, that because consciousness isn't strictly required in the equations, it has nothing to do with reality at all, and that the observer effect is just a cute physics fact with zero application to human life. This is where it gets interesting. Because whether or not consciousness collapses quantum states, there is a place where observation absolutely, unambiguously changes reality, and that place is the human mind. Psychologists have a term for this too. It's called reactivity, the well-documented phenomenon where the simple act of paying attention to a behavior changes that behavior. Ask someone to track how many times they check their phone, and the checking decreases, not because you told them to stop, but because they started watching themselves do it. Ask a person to notice their anger the moment it rises, and something shifts in how the anger unfolds, not eliminated, but altered. Observed anger and unobserved anger are not the same event. This is not folklore. It is one of the most replicated findings in behavioral psychology, and it's the foundation of an entire branch of therapy called self-monitoring. Diaries, food logs, mood trackers, they don't work because writing things down is magic. They work because attention itself is an intervention. The observer changes the observed. So here is the bridge, stated plainly, because this is the idea the rest of this video is built on. In physics, unwatched systems exist as probability, and watching collapses them into a single, fixed state. In the mind, unwatched patterns run on autopilot, repeating endlessly in the dark, and watching them collapses their automatic power. The particle doesn't know it's being observed. But you do. And that difference, the fact that you can watch yourself on purpose, is either the most overrated idea in self-help, or it's the single most practical tool a human being has ever had access to. I think it's the second one. And Carl Jung thought so too, nearly a century before anyone put those words together. In the early 1900s, Carl Jung, working alongside and eventually breaking away from Sigmund Freud, proposed a structure of the human psyche that went far beyond conscious and unconscious. Jung said that every person carries within them an aspect of themselves that the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. Not because it is evil. Not because it is monstrous. But because it is unacceptable, to the family that raised you, to the culture that shaped you, to the version of yourself you were told to become. He called this the shadow. Here is the part almost nobody explains correctly: the shadow is not the bad part of you. That's the pop psychology version, and it's wrong. The shadow is simply everything about you that got pushed out of the light because it didn't fit the story you were allowed to tell about yourself. If you were raised in a home where anger was punished, your capacity for anger didn't disappear. It went into the shadow. If you were praised only for being agreeable, your capacity for saying no, for taking up space, for wanting things loudly, that went into the shadow too. Even positive traits can be shadow material if they were forbidden. Jung called this the golden shadow, the greatness, the talent, the ambition a person buried because someone once made them feel it was arrogant, dangerous, or too much. The shadow, then, is not a monster in the basement. It is a warehouse of everything you were never allowed to be. And here's the mechanism that matters for this video: the shadow does not stay quiet just because it's hidden. Jung's central, unsettling claim was this: what we do not bring to consciousness, we experience as fate. Read that again, because it's the whole engine of this video. What we do not bring to consciousness, we experience as fate. The unwatched pattern doesn't disappear. It runs anyway, but instead of running as a choice, it runs as something that happens to you. The buried anger doesn't vanish, it leaks out sideways, in sarcasm, in passive aggression, in the sudden explosion over something small that was never really about the small thing. The buried ambition doesn't vanish, it becomes envy, the sharp, uncomfortable feeling you get watching someone else live the life you secretly wanted, without ever letting yourself admit you wanted it. Jung noticed something else, something that connects directly back to the observer effect we just spent 7 minutes establishing: the shadow is most powerful exactly when it is unobserved. He called this projection. Because you cannot look directly at your own shadow, your mind does something remarkable: it throws the image outward, onto other people. That coworker who infuriates you for being so arrogant, ask yourself, honestly, whether ambition is something you were ever allowed to want out loud. That friend whose neediness exhausts you, is there a chance that some hidden part of you is furious that you were never allowed to need anything either? This is not a coincidence. It's a mechanism. The shadow, unobserved, cannot be examined directly, so it borrows other people's faces to become visible. It runs as fate, disguised as other people's flaws. Let's make this concrete, because abstract psychology is easy to nod along to and easy to forget by the next commercial break. Think about the manager who cannot stand employees who push back, who label any disagreement as attitude or insubordination, who feel a hot flash of fury the moment someone in a meeting says, "I don't think that's right." Very often, underneath that fury, is a person who was never once allowed to disagree with their own parents, who learned, cell by cell, that pushback equals danger. They didn't lose the capacity to disagree. It went into the shadow. And now it comes back out sideways, as an allergic reaction to watching someone else do the thing they were never permitted to do. Or think about the friend who cannot stop mentioning, in almost every conversation, how fake and attention-seeking a particular kind of confident, visible person is. Ask what happens if we gently flip the mirror: was there ever a time this friend wanted to be seen, wanted to take up space, wanted attention, and was mocked, shamed, or ignored for wanting it? The contempt for attention seekers is very often the sound of a buried desire for attention, still alive, still knocking, dressed up as moral judgment so it can be expressed safely. Or think about the parent who reacts with disproportionate anger every time their teenager is lazy, sleeping in, skipping chores, dragging their feet. Some of that reaction is ordinary, reasonable frustration. But some of it, more often than people want to admit, is an adult who was never allowed to rest as a child, watching someone else claim a permission they never had, and experiencing that permission as an insult. None of these examples mean the irritation is unjustified, or that the coworker, friend, or teenager did nothing wrong. Shadow work is not a magic trick that erases legitimate boundaries. It is a lens that asks a harder, quieter question underneath the obvious one: why does this particular thing provoke a reaction so much larger than the situation calls for? That gap, between the size of the trigger and the size of the reaction, is almost always where the shadow is hiding. And this is where the quantum metaphor stops being a metaphor and starts being uncomfortably literal. An unobserved particle exists as a spread of probabilities, it could be almost anywhere. An unobserved shadow pattern exists as a spread of possible triggers, it could show up almost anywhere, attached to almost anyone, because it hasn't been pinned down to its actual source, you. The moment a physicist observes the particle, the spread collapses into one point. The moment a person observes their own shadow, really looks, without flinching, without immediately excusing it or condemning it, something structurally similar happens. The pattern stops being an ambient force that leaks out in 100 unpredictable directions. It becomes a single, nameable thing. And a nameable thing can be worked with. An ambient, unconscious force cannot. This is not a claim that thinking about your shadow makes it disappear. Jung was explicit about this, and so am I: the shadow does not go away. Wholeness was never about deleting the parts of you that were exiled, it was about integration, about welcoming them back into the room instead of locking them in a warehouse and pretending the door doesn't exist. But integration requires one non-negotiable first step, and it's the same first step required in a physics lab: you have to actually look. Here is where the video earns its title, because there's a layer most people never reach. We've established two things. First, observation collapses probability into a fixed state, in physics. Second, self-observation collapses unconscious, automatic patterns into conscious, workable ones, in psychology. But there's a third layer, and Jung himself hinted at it late in his life, in his more mystical writings, the ones his more academic followers tend to downplay because they sound less like clinical psychology and more like something you'd find in a Buddhist temple. Jung asked, who is doing the watching? When you observe your own anger, there is the anger, and there is something else, some part of you that is aware of the anger without being consumed by it. Call it awareness. Call it consciousness. Call it, if you want the word Jung sometimes reached for, the self, not the small self of daily habits and defended identity, but a deeper center that can hold the shadow, the ego, and everything else, without being any one of them. This watcher is strange, because it cannot be observed the way the shadow can. Try to turn your attention onto the part of you that is paying attention, and you'll notice something odd: it recedes. You can never quite catch it directly, the same way an eye cannot see itself without a mirror. There is something here that is genuinely similar to the deepest puzzles in quantum theory, where certain properties of a system can only be inferred, never directly measured, because the act of measuring them changes what they are. I'm not going to pretend that this proves consciousness and quantum mechanics are secretly the same phenomenon. There is no accepted scientific consensus that says human consciousness collapses quantum wave functions, and people who tell you otherwise, with total confidence, are usually selling something. Be skeptical of anyone, including channels like this one, who states that connection is settled fact rather than as a compelling structural parallel. But you don't need that grand unification to be true for the smaller claim to hold, and the smaller claim is the one that actually matters for your life. The part of you that watches is not the same as the part of you being watched. Your anger is not you. Your shadow is not you. Your habitual, automatic reactions are not you. They are patterns arising within a wider awareness that is capable of noticing them without being them. This distinction is the single most practical psychological tool available to a human being, and it's ancient. It predates Jung by thousands of years, showing up independently in Stoic philosophy, in Buddhist meditation, in the contemplative branches of nearly every wisdom tradition on earth. Jung's genius was building a modern, clinical bridge to it, one that didn't require you to accept any particular religious framework, just the observable fact that when you watch a reaction instead of becoming it, the reaction behaves differently. Try this the next time irritation rises in you. Instead of asking, "Why am I so angry?" which keeps you fused with the anger, ask, "What does it feel like to notice anger rising?" That tiny shift in phrasing creates a gap. And inside that gap is the watcher, the part of you that was always there, running quietly beneath every emotion you've ever had, never once identical to any of them. This is the part of you that Jung was pointing toward when he talked about individuation, the lifelong project of becoming a whole person by slowly, patiently bringing shadow material into the light of this watcher, not to destroy it, but to finally let it be seen by someone who can hold it without panicking. And this is the part of you that quantum physics, in its own strange and limited way, keeps gesturing toward when it insists that observation is never a passive act. Nothing sits still and waits to be seen. Everything, a particle, a habit, a buried grief, an inherited fear, behaves differently the instant it is truly looked at. You are not only the particle in this story. You are also, somehow, the observer. There's a reason this dual identity feels disorienting the first time you sit with it. Every other relationship you have in life involves two separate things, you and a person, you and an object, you and a place. But here, the watcher and the watched are both you, occupying the same body, the same moment, somehow distinct without ever being separable. Meditators have described this feeling for millennia using almost identical language across wildly different cultures and eras, the sensation of stepping back from a thought without going anywhere at all. You don't leave the room. You simply notice, for the first time, that you were never only the thought in the first place. This is worth sitting with for a moment, because it changes what integration actually means. It is not the ego absorbing the shadow, swallowing it whole, becoming bigger and more powerful by claiming ownership of every dark corner. That version of integration is just the ego in disguise, collecting trophies. Real integration happens one level up, in the watcher, the space that was never afraid of the shadow to begin with, because it was never in competition with it. The ego fears the shadow. The watcher simply notices it, the way you'd notice weather. Theory is worth nothing if it doesn't change a single evening of your actual life, so here is the practice, the same one I promised at the start of this video. Step 1, catch the projection. Think of someone who irritates you disproportionately, not someone who did something objectively cruel, but someone whose ordinary trait provokes a reaction that feels bigger than the situation. Write down, in one sentence, exactly what quality bothers you. Arrogant. Needy. Lazy. Loud. Cold. Step 2, reverse the mirror. Ask, without defending yourself, is there a version of this quality inside me that I was taught to hide, punish, or deny? Not the exact behavior, the underlying permission. If arrogance bothers you, the buried question might be, was I ever allowed to take up space? If neediness bothers you, the buried question might be, was I ever allowed to need anything without apologizing for it? Sit with the discomfort here. This step is supposed to feel uncomfortable. You are, for the first time, letting the watcher look directly at something the ego has spent years turning away from. Step 3, name it without judgment. This is the collapse moment, the equivalent of the detector catching the particle. Say the sentence out loud, or write it down, there is a part of me that also wants to be loud, and I learned to be afraid of it. Notice that naming it does not make you a worse person. It makes the pattern visible, and visible patterns can be worked with, integrated, chosen, instead of running you from the dark. Step 4, ask the watcher, not the ego, what comes next. The ego wants to fix, judge, or bury the pattern again immediately, that's its habit. Instead, pause and ask the deeper, quieter question, what would it look like to let this part of me exist, in a healthy, chosen form, instead of an exiled, leaking one? You don't need the full answer tonight. The question itself is the integration beginning. Step 5, give the pattern one small, safe outlet. Integration is not just insight without action tends to fade by morning. Once you've named the buried quality, find one small, low-stakes, chosen way to let a controlled version of it exist in your life this week. If the buried quality was taking up space, volunteer one honest opinion in a meeting you'd normally stay quiet in. If it was resting without guilt, take 15 unearned, unapologetic minutes of doing nothing, on purpose, and notice the discomfort without acting on it. The goal is not a dramatic transformation. The goal is proof, a small, lived experience that tells your nervous system this part of you can exist in the light without the disaster your younger self once feared. Do this once, honestly, about one person who irritates you, and pay attention to what happens the next time you interact with them. Most people report the same thing: the irritation doesn't necessarily vanish, but it loses its grip. It stops feeling like fate, and starts feeling like information. That shift, from fate to information, is the entire content of this video, compressed into one sentence. Somewhere, right now, a physicist is running the double-slit experiment for the 10,000th time, and the result will be the same as it has always been. Watched, the particle chooses. Unwatched, it stays a spread of infinite possibility. And somewhere in you, right now, there is a pattern running unwatched, leaking into a relationship, a reaction, a version of fate you've mistaken for personality. Jung spent his life insisting that psychological wholeness was not about becoming perfect, or good, or enlightened in some finished, permanent sense. It was about turning to face the parts of yourself you'd spent a lifetime looking away from, and simply watching them, honestly, without flinching and without excusing. Not to destroy them. To finally let them be seen by someone strong enough to hold them. Here's one last thought before you go, and it's the one I think about more than any other part of this video. Physicists have never once been able to catch a particle in the act of being unobserved. The moment you try to sneak up on it, to check what it was doing before you looked, the looking itself is already there, already changing the answer. You cannot get behind your own observation to see the raw, untouched world. The same is true of you. You will never get a clean, unobserved look at who you were before you started watching yourself. Every glance you take at your own shadow already changes it a little, the way every measurement changes the particle. There is no final, fixed self waiting at the bottom to be discovered once and for all, the way you might find a coin at the bottom of a well. There is only ever the next honest look. And then the one after that. Maybe that's not a disappointing answer. Maybe that's the most hopeful thing in this entire video, that you are never finished, never fixed, never sealed shut as one unchangeable thing. As long as you keep watching, you keep staying open to becoming someone slightly more whole than you were yesterday. That someone is not your ego, the small, defended self that built the walls in the first place. It's the watcher. The quiet awareness that has been running beneath every version of you, your whole life, waiting. So here is the question I'll leave you with, the one I want you to sit with tonight, maybe as you're falling asleep, when the ego's guard is finally down. What have you been calling fate, that might just be a shadow, still waiting to be watched? If this video changed the way you think about your own patterns, tell me in the comments which shadow you caught yourself projecting today. I read every single one, and the next video in this series will go deeper into how these projections build entire relationships without either person realizing it. Until then, keep watching. Especially the parts of yourself you'd rather not. I'll see you in the next one.